every time. But this time, it's going to be in the pit. Ooh. I think we've seen Viper on this once, maybe twice before. Wait, or was that Down? I don't think I've actually watched Viper on pit. So I'm kind of intrigued to see how he handles this map. Different to when he left. Going to be going up against Ingsoc. For those who do not know Ingsoc, he does all right. 108th in the world. Not too bad of a placement here compared to 64th for Viper. Let's see if he can educate Mr. AoE 2. Or if Mr. AoE 2 is just going to be the GOAT, as he always is. An HRE Abbasid matchup. What an interesting one, actually. Not one I would have expected on the pit. I say that, I feel like I've actually seen it a little bit more frequently recently. Especially, I'd say the HRE is getting whipped out more than it used to on pit. It's actually not that bad of a choice. The Sacred Sites are, the Relics are usually in a place that you can easily wall off and secure 2 to 3 of them. Also, this is a Civ that can quickly just boom up to Castle, rush the field with heavily armored units, and reach your base in a short time because the distance is fairly short and direct in a map like the Pit. Only downside to say is more that you have to quickly play out your base because your only safe resource is wood. And to be honest, if there's one resource that the HRE don't care about, it's wood, right? They use a lot of gold, they use a lot of food. Wood is probably the least used of the 3 for them. Even in late game, actually. Usually because in an HRE play, if they are in the hyper late game, they've probably got 3 relics. They're getting 600 gold per minute. They're just pushing more and more knights wherever they can, right? Then again, when you get to like a hyper late game situation, wood is always going to be the de facto winner. Simply because if you can just afford wood, you can afford food because you can get infinite food. And then you go push Unlimited Horsemen, which is the risk that Viper runs if this game does go too late, being up against one of the best civs at doing exactly that in the Abbasids. Why are they the best? They don't have any special horseman pigeon. Why would they be the best? Their gathering rates. The gathering rates are absurd. They get a 15% gathering rate out of the gate from just building this House of Wisdom right here, which is, by the way, why people rush to get to that tier 1 as fast as possible. Once tier 1's unlocked, this civ booms like crazy. On top of that, once they are at that stage where they got up to the late game, they'll be at tier 3, so they'll get an extra 5% on gathering rate. They'll have increased production rates. Along the way, they're going to improve the farms, which are infinite in terms of food gathering with agriculture. They'll eventually get improved processing. Like, this civ just gets absurd. These 2 techs here alone, which you can have by Castle Age, are a 35% increased gathering rate on farms. And, of course, you can be at 20% across the board. It's just very difficult for any civ to compete with that. I mean, the HRE do a decent job, right? Like, they have phenomenal gathering rates, 40% increased gathering rate. But I think when you get into the late game, even the HRE feels irrelevant. Because when you start to flesh out across the map and you can't just be buffed around Aachen Chapel, think about what the Abbasids are getting there. We just mentioned they're going to have a 35% rate via these unique things in themselves. And then you get the 8% in Imperial Age. They're already just outdoing HRE. It's pretty vexing to think about that, actually. The logic, though, that balances it is the HRE boom sooner, right? So, really, the TLDR here is that the Viper should be looking for a more fast, aggressive timing compared to that of Ingsoc. Ingsoc should be much more content with the game going incredibly late, as long as he does so from a balance point. So, what I mean by that is if you're saying, I like late game, I'm fine with late game, but you hand over 5 relics to Viper, your late game, it doesn't matter how great you are, it's going to look pretty abysmal because Viper's going to escalate to critical point much quicker than you will. That's the point of the HRE. The eco is best utilized to reach key tech timings. And Castle Age will definitely be best on the menu for Viper. Speaking of Mr. Snake Man. Viper, a guy who used to be known for his love of Minework Pass, is not going towards it in this situation. That's it, guys. I think I saw a discussion on Reddit the other day where someone was like, in what situations do you go Minework? And my response was, Minework when you want to lose, Aachen when you want to win. And when even probably the only pro I can recall who was frequently building Minework maybe 2 or 3 months ago is now just building Aachen every time I see him. I think you got your answer that it's time to just drop any attempt of making Minework work. Let's just rename it to Mine Don't Work, because it just doesn't. The problem, by the way, with Minework more than anything else is the research speed is nice, but I think the bigger deal was really meant to be the discounts in conjunction. The problem is the discounts really don't pay dividends until later on in the game. Like the savings you make, although the whole logic is that in a game like AoE with an expanding eco, those small savings are still compounded and somewhat effective in the early game. I think you don't rush towards them as frequently on a Mind Work, especially with stuff like HRE, because how quickly you want to tech anyway. And also, you're making the biggest savings much later in the game, when it can matter that you're saving X amount of gold because gold becomes limited in Imperial Age. Compared to this stage in the game, when if you need to access gold, there's plenty of it. And the other crazy part about this idea that the discount is kind of a whoop-de-doo-dah when I've got the increased gathering rate. In fact, the logic that I would apply to people thinking Mind Work is good is if I can get Ahan and I can buff everyone around Ahan by 40%, does it matter that I then save 40% in Mind Work? Because by that logic, it becomes a neutral point, right? That I will get the resource required for a tech up at the same time if my eco is buffed versus an eco that isn't buffed. Now, obviously, the balance point is, well, what if I was to build prelates instead? But every time you build a prelate, you're losing a villager. I think if someone genuinely wanted to go out of their way, delusionally, I'd say, to make Mind Work functional, you'd have to be doing a 2 or 3 TC build. And there are situations where the double TC can be really good, especially when you need to secure additional resources. But even then, I think Ahan serves a better purpose. Anyway, with my hate of Mind Work done, let's talk about what's going on here. Ingsok went for a wide secondary TC. Interestingly enough, actually, Ingsok is already 3 villages ahead. Did Viper miss production? I think he must have. I mean, he wouldn't have been killed on his villages, really, right? Like, they're fine. Oh, he went extra prelates. Okay, yeah, this is fair. I'm kind of surprised that he went for 2 additional prelates, though. That's the detail that was throwing me looking at the eco count. 1 extra one makes sense due to the gold, but a second one for the berries feels like a weird waste. This does at least give Viper a more aggressive timing to pick up relics at the beginning of Castle Age. But realistically, I think the lost value of an additional villager is a bigger hit than like getting the relics slightly quicker. Just because the difference is now with the way that Castle Age works. Remember, now when you hit Castle Age with the HRE, your Regnates can produce prelates every 20 seconds. So you don't have as much of a hit to your gathering of relics than you used to, where before you had to get them out of the TC. Anyway, TC expansion from Ingsok is good in this game, by the way. Usually you want to keep your TC somewhat close to base, because one of the big issues you run into is that you just don't want to have them burnt down, right? That's obvious, right, when we're talking about TC expansions. But the reason why the Bastards benefit more than other civs from keeping their TCs a bit closer is because once you branch these into the Golden Age influence, you get the fire armor, an extra 5 fire armor. So it's very difficult for your opponents to torch down. But in this situation, the upside is just too good. He's eventually going to wall this anyway. And then he's also now guarding a relic by default. He grabs one of the biggest berry patches imaginable. You can see the juicy 8 there. And then on top of that, he has the secondary woodline he'll have access to, as well as gold stone behind him. And this might even set him up to go trade later on. So, trying to see if we get to that point. But for the time being, it is going to be the Horseman push coming out from Ingsok. Now adding in a Camel Archer as well. And on the other side, Viper should be making his way up soon. Like the way that he's slowly layering in farms, by the way. This is something cool you can do with the HRE. I actually think it's the more beneficial build. If you don't think you can play it onto the deer stacks because it's a bit too gambly, you should be slowly transitioning farms before reaching castle. The logic here is because of your 40% increased gathering rates, especially when it's on wood, you can afford the upfront cost of 75 wood per farm gradually as a transition. Yeah, indeed. Ooh, speaking of transitions, from Horseman into melee mosh pit with the racks being added in. Love this choice by Viper. This is a pretty cool play. He sets up trip racks. That's going to now secure him 3 relics in this area. Could even push in and take out that TC. I think he done this because of the position of Ingsok's town center. I think Viper scouted out that split, and he realized that he could actually rush it and torch it down. So now if Viper goes up to, say, 12 men at arms, which he's already escalating towards before the tech up completes, he can just flood in, burn down this town center, and Ingsok has no solution because you're playing Age 2 units. What's going to kill these MAA? Camel Archers do an okay job, but it's impossible for an Abbasid player to have that many Camel Archers at this stage in the game. And why? Well, they're 180 food and 60 wood each. They are not cheap. Not to mention the fact there's also the production time. So unless you want to layer in 4 or 5 of these archery ranges, which why would you? You can't even afford the cost of that many camel archers at this point. It takes 35 seconds per. So to get those production rates up that fast, you need several archery ranges. Horseman, in the meantime, just proving to be a little bit of a nuisance. Ingsok will move out to punish that. Hits the wrong Horseman, but right into the base now coming through. And Viper, mistakes have been made, sir. You've teched up. You haven't even moved to pick up the relics yet. Villagers are going to be pulled back. Ingsok, this is a premium raid, actually. Shuts out the gold. That's going to prevent premium knight units from coming out in mass. And he can now actually raid in the backside. In fact, Ingsok's making a little bit of a mistake here. He should not be diving the primary TC. Instead, he should be wrapping to the north side. This Arhen is completely exposed, and he does have the vision to know this. And a mirrored move now from Viper as he starts to strike out. And arms only up to 7, and they have been upgraded with the extra ranged armor, so diving the TC is pretty easy peas for them. Meanwhile, the dive on the backside of the base does come in. Ingsok able to push his opponent away for the time being. Horsemen are going to begin to clash here. Problem is the spears. The spears counter him out, and he can't pull the MAA back because they are on the other side of the map. Not exactly what you call fast movers. Viper, interesting choice here. Instead of trying to torch down the TC, he's just going to chase away all the villagers. We'll strike one down, but realistically, you want to be getting up to 12 to 15 of these MAA and then going after the town center. The problem for him is with this raid on the backside, it blocked him out of gathering the food required for that many men-at-arms. That's buying vital time for Ingsok. Ingsok just needs to sort the gold. Actually, where is his gold? Okay, his gold isn't being extracted at all right now. I think Ingsok's distracted by the MAA dive. He doesn't even realize he's not gathering gold. Bit of a mistake here. Definitely needs to start that tech up soon. Every second you wait, it's going to give opportunities for Viper to start to grab all those relics before you get to a position of power. Whether this raid on the backside is at least decent in terms of value for Ingsok. Idling a lot of eco, blocking out the wood, blocking out the extension of more farms. It's finally going to be pushed away. Wall was prevented from going up, which means now Viper can dive in and ruin this TC again. Still hasn't been cleaned up in the back of the base either. Finally, last of the men-at-arms is going to go down. I don't know if this was worthwhile for the time it bought. The Camel Archers are still alive, right? I think this is one of the big baits when you send blobs of MAA into your opponent's base. If you're not able to idle a sufficient amount of their economy, all you're doing is ensuring you slowly sacrifice these units, and your opponent is probably just going to build a bigger army up as a result. Right, let's look at this specific situation. Your opponent's building loads of Camel Archers. He's amassing them. He's getting to a decent margin, right, up to 8 now. Every time you dive in like this and you eventually lose the MAA, you might stagnate his gathering rates, but you're not doing anything to impact his army count, which means each of these premium units he's building, there's just going to be more of them each time you come in. And your raids will become less effective, and a higher likelihood occurs that he's going to come in and now raid you instead. Which, speaking of that raid, it still hasn't been cleaned up this whole time, by the way. Still shutting down the farms, and I mean, at some point, you just got to call a spade, right? You can't keep coming back to this farming area. Maybe you just need to create a mill on this side close to the Regnitz and produce a few farms that are still in Arhen range, but close to the TC. Still, Viper, ignorantly, we'll just go back to those farms. Still has to worry about a few troops, but most of them have been cleaned up. No wall on the south side means the second raid could come in, but instead, that raid is going to be prioritized on the north side, just in case the Raxes are still operational. Pretty cool play, actually, by Ingsok. With this many Camel Archers, you can very quickly dispatch the men-at-arms, and there's nothing they can do about it. I mean, they just don't move quick enough to return fire. Just look at it. I mean, this is absurd how quickly you die to them. This is why they're so premium, by the way. This is why they're so expensive. These are feudal-age units doing 12 damage by default. An extra 1 as well due to the armory upgrade. Blacksmith. What? Armory? Why am I saying armory? Oh, good lord. Speaking of lads that have been armed in the armory. Villagers once again being assaulted. Viper, I mean, this is hitting hard now. Ingsok, the only upside for Viper is Ingsok took a very long time to hit that tech up button. It's finally underway. Also, another detail, oh no. He doesn't realize he's housed. Is he building a house anywhere? I don't think he is. And he's too distracted right now on the front side. Skirting around, running away from knights here and there. That's a heavy hit. Because, like, the issue you have to consider here is your 2 TCs, you want to escalate your eco lead. You've done all this great damage to Viper's economy. You should now be 4 or 5 extra villages ahead. But every second, every 10, 20 seconds, you forget that you are housed. actually discredits all the damage you just done into Viper's base because you're no longer extending your lead. Now, militarily, you're getting a lead, but you want more than that. Finally, he realizes it, but that was a lot of time missed out on. Viper maybe getting some much-needed breathing space because of it. Oy, oy, oy. Problematic as well. I think it seems nitpicky or small, but fundamentally, like what Ingsoc has done here, I think we were close to a minute of being housed. So with 2 TCs, you're missing out on 6 extra villages, which are cheap. So the point is that they're also incredibly cheap, so you want to be producing them at all times. And alongside that, you missed out on the ability to escalate your army count. And you can see the impact of this. Like, he has almost 2k food surplus built up when he reaches Castle Age. Sometimes this happens just because the way the Abbasis work, right? They don't invest villages to tech up quickly, and it takes almost 2 minutes. But realistically, the reason this happened in this game is because Ingsoc didn't have any pop cap space to spend the resource. And if you look at what his comp is, massing Camel Archers, he wanted to be spending this entire time. At least he's finally there. At least he's finally realized his house. And also is now prepping crossbows alongside the upgrade on the Camel Archers. Camel Archer count is now up to 19 for him. So once again, imagine that number if he didn't pop cap himself, right? They'd probably be, I'd say, 24. Maybe more. These men-at-arms are proving infuriating for Ingsoc. He's cleaning them up. It still takes a lot of time to get through them, especially now that you still haven't got your Camel Archer upgrade coming through yet, and you got an extra 1 ranged armor on the MAA. Knights are now sneaking in while Ingsoc isn't looking as well. Crossbow counter is finally starting to come out, but in small quantities, so it won't quickly dispatch these Knights. Means once again, Viper is chipping away at that eco lead Ingsoc has built up. At least he's finally getting rid of some of this Rax infrastructure. Meanwhile, though, Viper is looking to reboom. He went for a secondary TC. I like this play here. One big issue for Viper is that his farm land wasn't actually extending at the anticipated rate. So his food rates were sucking really poorly, actually. He was not able to compete at all. By going out here, he can save required resources on wood investment to just go for deer in the meantime, and it gets him through a very uncomfortable phase in the game, where he needs to actually reboom his eco, but he also needs to push enough men-at-arms to keep Ingsoc at bay. So good heads-up play. A lot of players there would have just stuck 1 TC and attempted to rush Imperial Age. You can't. Imperial is ultimately better if you think about the way Viper's build started here. You just get past Swabia quickly, and it's better than this 1 TC. It's 3 TCs with a discount. The problem he has, however, is with the big, heavy delays on the backside, his food gathering rates just didn't compound. They actually got stagnant. And it means that if he had rushed Imperial now, he would have sacrificed all men-at-arms production, and you'd have about 25 Camel Archers already in your base. Speaking of those Camel Archers, they're trying to sneak through, but once again, the Knights are in. Oh, this has to be getting so annoying now. Viper just keeps sneaking a few in. I actually go off the Camel Archers, so somewhat given a decent exchange, actually, because if you just killed 2 Camel Archers, these Knights paid for themselves. Of course, there was a Horseman in there as well. But it slowed down the whole army. Like, notice what he's doing now. Viper, so he just exchanged these units for their value, and now he dives the back of the base to force more army to respond. And there is a big overreaction from Ingsoc. He sends in 24 units to chase these 2 lads. Camel Archers are at least going to move forward, but this is worst case scenario considering you're up against TCs, there's going to be more Knights waiting for you. Like, you want that front line. You wish you could have the spears there. Instead, they waste a lot of time chasing these Knights into the back of their base. Good move by Viper. And also more moves coming on the north side as he reopens that area for engagement. Clash in his base, though. Camel Archer count looking damn good for Ingsoc, especially with the side steps. Once again, it's the static defenses that are a problem. The Knights you can kite and eventually kill, but there's nothing you can do when he reaches TCs and outposts like this. Outposts that are now also being upgraded with Springolds. It's going to be very difficult to dive. Ingsoc might benefit from slowing down a little bit and getting a Trebuchet out. It's tough because you're up against the HRE and it's not going to quickly kill the buildings due to E-repairs. But once you get to 2 Trebs, you can quickly get rid of all these stables and the outposts as well. And all you really have to do is mass Spearmen and Camel Archers to defend them. Cool thing about doing that, by the way, as opposed to the Crossbowmen, you're going to save some more resources. You also don't have to worry about men-at-arms. You're just playing towards your complementary standard and timing, really. Ooh, speaking of something that complements the Abbas as well. 3 TCs. He did actually go for the third in the end. I think this is because he saw the extra TC by Viper, so he wants to extend his eco lead still. Kind of needs to, right? Because you're talking about a Sith that has a 40% increased gathering rate, so even though you have a clear raw number advantage, it's not as high as you'd think, especially when you consider the farm transition isn't complete just yet and agriculture hasn't been researched. So Ingsok's gathering rate isn't at the HRE level just yet. Ingsok needs to get these walls up, and he knows it. Once the walls are up, Viper begins to lose options, but it looks like Viper is playing wide side. Love this choice with the static defenses in place and now a keep drop as well. He doesn't necessarily have to invest much in defending. However, Ingsok does have a dive point down the direct center of the base. And that would access the farmlands. Farmlands that I believe do have Sprune and placement upgrades around them. But the Camel Archers will kill a lot of villagers. So the trade can be worthwhile for him. See how far he wants to dive. Fortified outpost now. Keeps as well. Ingsok, he's diving. What? Oh, he's distracted right now, I think. Yeah, he's garrisoning villagers back at home, which means he doesn't notice his Camel Archers just dove a keep. This is a bad fight for Ingsok to be taken, even with this many troops. And once again, just imagine if he'd slowed down and got a workshop. Imagine if he had 2 trebuchets right now. This is wasted effort. He has to pull everyone back. Meanwhile, look at the backside of his base. Ingsok is idling around 20 to 25 villagers here. 2 TCs that can't even produce villagers either. And once again, Knights on the backside that are going to be an infuriating detail he has to address. And while he's addressing that, Viper is going to solve the eco deficit problem. One that he isn't actually suffering from in terms of raw gains, but has in terms of villager count. It's no longer going to be that either, because he's going in for the Palace of Swabia. He does so at the very back of his base, where Ingsok will not notice. Ingsok, these Rams, man. I would have preferred the Trebs. I really would have preferred the Trebs. Not now. I mean, it would have had to have been earlier. He's kind of stuck with this plaster on the wound solution, right? But the problem is you're putting a little baby plaster on what is clearly a giant bite mark from a bear. It's not exactly going to solve the infected wound underneath. The infected wound in this situation is a clear deficit. You're playing from behind, and you can't even deny it anymore. Especially when you're about to get the bad news. Tech Up's going to be complete, and behind it, a mass surge of heavy hitting men-at-arms to come. Dive in towards the Regnants. Ram's working on this. E-Repairs is ready to be pumped by Viper. That's going to buy him some vital time to get the initial upgrades in place. You see, he's going to now start massing the troops. Langsnecht will be coming out soon. Solid solution to pretty much everything you're up against. E-Repairs does get triggered, so Ingsok's going to dive deeper. However, he's diving deep into protected areas here. And he did expose his Rams, so there's going to be a move in from the Horsemen. Just a few troops here to slow this down. Thinking one of the Rams could be worthwhile for them. E-Repairs is about to run out, but time has definitely been bought for Viper. Diving even deeper, but the Camel Archers with limited armor and limited health cannot stand underneath Sprue fire this long, especially when they're attacking farms. He's at least going to burn the Regnants down, but I don't think Viper cares about this as much anymore. Military is an issue, however, that he needs to quickly recover. First Langsnecht plus MA are going to come out, and they're going to wipe the fight here. Spearmen stand their ground, but Ingsok, I think he's spread a little bit too thin. Like a small knob of butter across a whole loaf of bread. It's just not going to give you the creamy goodness you're looking for here. And one of the primary TC, I mean, this is problematic. Ingsok, he was over 70, military close to 80. Now he's down to 55. Meanwhile, Viper's military count has just increased again, close to 20. A lot of idle eco, but he can afford it at this stage in the game because of how many people are being pushed out of the Palace of Swabia. Now he's going to start getting cleaned up. I mean, this fight by Ingsok, I think he jumped the gun, he rushed a little bit. Didn't give enough respect to the damage that a small flank attack could do. It set him back, and although he's definitely idling a lot of Viper's base, I'm just concerned at these numbers now. I mean, it's pretty much the whole army gone. Ingsok shows no signs of teching up. In fact, Viper, in the next minute, is going to have the military pop cap lead. And it's all because you're just pushing spears, crossbows, you have no anti-clump, you have no good siege, you've only got 2 Rams, like you're just not doing enough damage. Imagine this situation if Ingsok had earlier on gone for a trebuchet or 2. He was already layering the base down, taking out stables, taking out the keep, taking out farms, whatever have you. How different does this game look? How much harder is it for Viper to stay in this? But instead, Ingsoc greedily thought he could just build 2 rams and end the game fast enough. Although he crippled Viper's economy, Viper is now free to boom. And then there's a big question mark. What does Ingsoc do? I mean, you see, he's actually hoarding a lot of gold, but I don't think there's much he can do with it. Regnitz is now being rebuilt by Viper as well, so he'll soon have all his cash back in the bank via these juicy relics. That is one detail, by the way. I'm wondering if Viper knows about this change as well. I don't know why he's garrisoning relics in the Regnitz as opposed to the outposts and keeps. Maybe you could argue not the outposts because they're going to be torched down, but this keep definitely should have had a relic in it the whole time. It would have done a lot more damage, remember. It would have got a huge increase into its weapon range, its damage. Would have killed several more units in that time. But despite those inefficiencies, I mean, they seem to be shadowed by this choice Ingsoc's made to continue to invest into rams. I just don't like this anymore. This feels like you're playing to lose the game now. Especially with Bombards now arriving. Bombards that can easily snipe out these rams, by the way. 100 damage a pop. You definitely feel the sting. And Viper just setting up another keep to make sure there's no deep raids again. Bombards will deal with the outposts. Springles aren't even looking to address that Bombard yet. And you can see he's shifting around with the rams, but it's too little too late. Ingsoc, this dive is not going to hit his timing. The keep is going to go up. Viper is going to be safe, and Ingsoc may have just thrown away another army. Mangonel shot about to come in. Needs to be careful. A heavy hit into the crossbows. On the backside as well. Oi, oi, oi. Good boy to the entire army. Mango won't get the second shot out, but the keep is the detail that matters here. Ingsoc just threw away another army, and this one is going to achieve a lot less than its predecessor. Bombard also being repaired means the Sprill can't even trade out for some value there. Viper is once again going to hold. Ingsoc does at least have a hell of a big eco lead, but he's still a whole age behind. He hasn't even started the tech up yet. The keep. Looks like the keep might actually get killed off here unless the villagers can keep it alive. Viper is rushing to do exactly that right now. Once again, a lot of idle time achieved, but Viper, I mean, that eco is going to reboom very fast. You have to remember, this guy is at 5 TC effective. Ingsoc, the ceiling isn't much higher than this right now. Maybe you go up to 130, 140 eco. Even then, like, what do you do next? Go Imperial Age? That's a 2-minute wait. Yeah, these ideas by Ingsoc seem good, but like fundamentally the issue is once again, where are the trebuchets? I'm just going to keep coming back to that detail, like some sort of treb fetishes. But it matters so much here. I think trebs give you a permanent fixture outside your opponent's base that does gradual damage. In theory, ram rushes can do more in shorter time, but that doesn't work against the HRE due to E-repairs. E-repairs offsets a lot of your potential here. Now, with that reset again, I mean, the last one was effective, right? That set Viper back, but he still survives, and you sacrifice a lot. This second one, I think Ingsoc just threw away an army for next to nothing. If he does this again, I think Viper's going to actually have a clear standing army, and he's going to blitz across the map. The good news, at least for Ingsoc, is he's waiting, taking out the proxy base, and finally teching up. While he's doing that, Viper is once again playing the other side of the map here, now with the Horsemen raiding on the south side. Goal is just to get in, delay things, stagnate things, because he knows that Ingsoc's probably going to have a spread out farmland, and we can see just how spread out that is. Oy, oy, oy. And I think Ingsoc maybe considers going trade here for the long game. That's probably his best hope, because I think now we're in a window of opportunity for Viper. This is probably where he's been strongest this entire game. And he's going to raid straight in. And what? Ingsoc, what? That is not the way to do this. The villagers all run in the same place to garrison. So much idle eco. Men at arms running to the backside. Looks like Viper doesn't notice there's a bunch of villagers he could pinch here. We'll realize it a bit too late so the crossbows can punish him. But still, the idle eco alone, I actually think that Viper, he just paid for all these MAA with the amount of time these villagers weren't gathering. Still no agriculture for Ingsoc. This is starting to hurt me, man. It's not even 200 resources for a 15% increased gathering rate on a villager force of 82 farms. 82 farms, guys. Like, I just can't even... The numbers, man. The numbers. Okay, he's finally getting it. This probably should have been here a very long time ago, though. Obviously, he was having the tech up, but I think even before he began the tech up, like, he could have got agriculture and then teched up, right? And it would have been so good. I'm glad he's at least hitting it right now, though. I'm not so glad about is how Ingsok is fully backed up after that raid on the south side. I think Viper is fully recovered. Like, you can see there's still a clear eco lead, 30 above for Ingsok, but all I can think about is how much of this HRE eco is being buffed. Quite a lot of it, actually. I mean, the prelate count has to be at, like, what, 7? 6. 6 total, well, 7th with the one inside the Ahan. So he's pretty efficient, actually. I'd say overall his eco strength is probably at, like, 130-ish? 140-ish, maybe? Now, of course, the Abbasis have their own buffs as well, sure. But the point is that the Viper is not weak by any stretch of the imagination, right? Like, he gathered 3 relics in the end. Actually, I think he got 4. Wait, no, what? He's going to get 4, I hope, soon. Oh, my God. They both ignored it. How are we 31 minutes into this game with the way it's played out, and this relic is only now being picked up? Oh, that's grim. Yeah, look at the numbers raw. You can see Ingsok does have a lead. That's a given. I just don't think... I still don't think it's as strong. I think Viper's comp is going to be a lot more effective, especially if he goes back to adding in Langsnecht. But now it looks like it's just going to be Horseman, Men at Arms. I think the bigger issue I'm seeing for Ingsok is, like, if he could get a direct fight with all his crossbowmen in place and Viper just commits, great. Great fight. He could win that fight. But you can see that Viper has no intent of fighting him directly. In fact, he just keeps going left and right, forcing Ingsok to slowly forfeit map control, as you can see with these walls being further and further back. Relic War is going to continue. I'm also concerned about the lack of anti-siege. One Mangonel could really crap on Ingsok's day here. Like, his crossbows are the only X factor he has, but this Mango is unanswered. In the choke point, you can see he's just rushing. No! Ingsok, no! What's going on? There's Langsnecht there and he doesn't even know us. He's body blocked. Oh my God. Ingsok. Ignorant, more like. He did not know us, the army. The body block, the Langsnecht, the cleanup, and now the plow through. Viper is in. He will not hesitate to push that. That was a mistake that you could not afford to make. Ingsok may now find himself in shambles. He might struggle to actually quickly reproduce what he needs here. Viper did not hesitate. He saw what was going on. He was always going to find that choke point due to the Mangonel. He was expecting a somewhat even trade, but due to the fact that Ingsok was not paying attention with the first wave, it's an absolute rout. And Ingsok is struggling to replace all that is lost here. Viper, meanwhile, plowing in now. The MAA spreading out and clustering on the farms. Relic also going to be picked up and walked away. We'll need another Prelate to come and retrieve that, but the damage truly is being done here. Ingsok, it's going to take him a long time to rebuild the army. Maybe a little bit too long here. Not imagine the economy behind this. Viper has spread out onto the farms. Ingsok, so many villagers being butchered or not working. All of a sudden, after everything he worked towards here, Viper is now 20 villagers ahead of Ingsok. And he has another opening over here. He hasn't burnt it down yet, but he can make his way in. It's just coming. Actually, he's still already got the gap. This all falling apart. Ingsok, that slip up, that mistake, that critical error, being distracted, looking elsewhere, has cost him complete control of this game. And I don't see any easy way to recover it now, because Viper is in everywhere. Like a never-ending wave of yellow turban rebellions here. It's going to be too much for him. GG is going to get called. A game that looks somewhat even turned around so quickly from missing one slight detail there. Gives Viper the win.